Some abuse happens in isolated events, but other times abuse is the very design. It's the system. It's the purpose of the entire structure. Sometimes child abuse occurs within a family like a fluke, a sick anomaly, but some families don't just hide abuse, they form around it, they protect it, they thrive off of it. These families are cults. There is control, isolation, punishment if you step out of line. There is humiliation for speaking up and reward for staying silent. They suppress autonomy, dignity, and critical thinking from an early age. They don't need a compound or a commune. They do this right in your neighborhood, in churches, in schools, during holidays, and at family reunions. And at the center of it all is usually one unspoken belief, a demonic ideology that binds the family in fear and secrecy. When that core is rooted in occult practices, when abuse is spiritualized, ritualized, and repeated, that's not just dysfunction, that's ritual abuse, occult abuse. These aren't stories from the past. No, they're happening as we speak. When I knew the Lord wanted me to speak on this issue, I didn't want to just give theory. I wanted to share stories of true life people, and lo and behold, in the days as I was writing this letter, the first stories I'll share would come to my attention. The first story is of Shoshana Strook. Now, she is the daughter of prominent Israeli Minister of Settlements and National Missions, Orit Strook. She's also a grandmother of 12. In April 2025, earlier this month, Shoshana publicly accused her parents and brother of horrific childhood abuse. Not just sexual abuse, but ritual abuse, allegedly being filmed for child pornography. Her escape was desperate. She initially fled to Italy, where she filed police reports in hope to find justice. Eventually, she would return back to Israel and would file a report again. Shoshana's story reveals a system and a family built not just on control, but on a spiritual distortion, so thick that victims often cannot breathe, let alone speak. This is the kind of abuse people don't want to believe is real. Occultic families equals ritual abuse, and yes, it almost always leads to sexual abuse, but the core of it is indoctrination. Indoctrination isn't just about belief. It's about obedience. Its goal is to take over the thinking of the most vulnerable, especially children, so that when the abuse happens, they won't run, they won't fight, they will comply. They'll begin to justify it in their heads. They will believe escape is pointless, and eventually they become protectors of the very system that broke them. It demands conformity, groupthink. Everyone must think the same way, act the same way, move the same way. They call it family culture. Kids are taught who to trust and who not to, who is safe and who is off limits. If a child expresses attachment to someone outside the system, they are punished. Maybe not overtly, maybe with a sneer, a silent treatment, a passive-aggressive comment. This is how indoctrination works. But indoctrination doesn't always look like rules and rigid routines. Sometimes it is made to look like love, like loyalty, like legacy. It wraps itself in family sayings and cultural pride. It hides behind smiles and nicknames and matching outfits. And if you try to question it, you are made to feel like you are the problem. You're breaking up the family. You're being disrespectful. You're making too much of nothing. And so with that, I lay before you another story of a vibrant young woman raised in a family bound by secrecy and not love, bound by control and not care, bound by rituals and not righteousness. Listen closely, because her story is not rare, it's just rarely believed. Wealth is a 20-year-old Congolese British girl. For nearly 15 years, she would endure ritual abuse at the hands of her own father. At the age of 5, she was living safely with her biological mother, who had physical custody of her and her siblings then. She had little to no contact with her father, until one day he would begin filing for visitation. Their first meetings were at a McDonald's, simple, familiar, harmless. It felt like a reconnection. Eventually, the visits would move to his home. Now, Wealth says that her mother at the time tried to warn her, telling her that he's not safe, that he's not who she thinks he is. Let's pause here at this moment and look at what we have. We have 4 people now in this story: Wealth, her mother, her father, and now you. Wealth is just a child, excited to see her father. She doesn't know any better. She has no context for danger, only longing. Her mother, she was building a new life, likely one that she had fought tirelessly for, maybe even fled for. She was trying to give her daughter safety, stability, and peace. And then we have Wealth's father, who re-enters the scene after years of absence and now wants time, connection, and full access. And now you. What are you thinking when you see all this? Some of you might say, well, she's his daughter too. He deserves to be in her life. Others might wonder, why now? Why is he showing up out of the blue? But let's keep listening as we hear more of her story. Wealth recalls that for almost a year, her father didn't do anything outright violent. Instead, he gave her rules. That is how it all began. He would make her write down a list of rules every time she was there. Repeat them, live by them, write them in notebooks, write them on scratch paper. She could not use her phone, she could not play or speak freely, and she could not go to school. It was like entering a new world, one with cold order and control, one where obedience was not just expected, but enforced. At her mother's, she had school, freedom, and play. At her father's, she had restriction, silence, and fear. 2 different worlds, one child caught in the middle. She says that after a year of visits with her father, everything would change. Whereas at first he would entice her with food or sweets, now when he picked her up, he would get right to the chase. He would pick her up and put her into a large van or take her to a room in his house. And at that time, he would bring men in that would begin to abuse her and rape her. Her father standing right there, but looking away. Her father would later tell her that he belonged to a cult, and so did many in his family. He told her that she had been chosen to be the family's sacrificial lamb, the scapegoat, that she had to carry the weight of the family's pain, misfortune, and spiritual debt. In their family cult, they believed that by abusing her, they were transferring their sins and darkness onto her. This is scapegoating. In occult family systems, there is often no real belief in Christ as Redeemer. When problems arise, financial blockages, health issues, curses, they don't seek deliverance through God. They turn to the cult for help. And those systems always demand something in return. What's the price? Blood, flesh, control, the innocence of the vulnerable. And who usually offers the sacrifice? The one with the spiritual or structural power in the household, often the father. And if it's the mother, both parents are usually aware. Now look at how that played out here. From the outside, Wealth's story just looks like a custody case, a father coming back into his daughter's life, a legal win, an arrangement. But behind the curtain, this is coercion, entrapment, systematic, spiritual, and psychological breakdown. Again, let's pause for another snapshot. Maybe you hear about these rules that she had to write, and you think, well, she must be very disciplined. Maybe initially you flinched, but then you tell yourself, maybe it's a cultural thing. You ask your other friends from other cultures, and when you hear their stories of strict parenting, you normalize it, think it was nothing. But now you hear the harm that she was facing, and everything changes. Soon, Wealth's father would remarry. Wealth describes a scene where she was trying to warn her new stepmother that she would be beaten like the other women that came before her. But she would pay a price for that, and she was punished and gossiped on for speaking up. One day, Wealth watched as her father began to beat on his new wife the same way that he would beat her. And seeing that, her heart broke. Even being a child, she tried to protect her stepmother. She told him, "Don't hurt her, hurt me instead. You said that I was the sacrificial lamb, and At that moment, this was twisted into a trap for her. Her father and the other members of the cult would tell her, well, if you want us to stop hurting her, you have to stay. You have to join us fully. She was just 13 or 14. And so like that, she left her mother's home and moved in with her father full time. Why? Guilt, intimidation, fear, pressure. One of the rules that Wealth was given was no school. Unless she found a way to sneak out, she would remain confined in the home or in a warehouse where she was brutally abused by men through the day. If you were watching this from the outside, this is what you would see. On paper, dad files for custody, custody granted, child adjusts well, quote unquote, requests to move in with dad full time, obeys house rules, everything looks fine. But the real story, mom was the protector. Dad slowly pulled the child away through manipulation and intimidation. He would use fear to silence her. Eventually, she was completely isolated. Wealth describes being bruised and broken in her body for most days. Once, she recalls not even being able to stand up straight, having a swollen lip and a swollen face. One day, when she was able to sneak to school, during a health checkup, a nurse would notice her condition and would call the authorities. That was the turning point. She was finally placed in foster care. That's where her story is for now. But hear this, there are many Wealths sitting in your community, sitting in your schools and churches today. This is not just a cultural thing, it's a dark family system. Her father was deeply entangled in something spiritually destructive and brought that darkness into his daughter's life. Let me say it again. If Wealth came to your church and said, "I'm not safe," what would you do? Call her parents? Her father is the one hurting her. Report it? She may have been coerced to not speak. Do you see the disconnect between what's happening inside the home and what it looks like on paper? On the surface, a custody case. In reality, a system of spiritual, physical, and psychological abuse, masked by law, silence, and deception. Some may even say, well, the parents should have never divorced. Let's talk about that. If Wealth was enduring this, who else knows what her mother had endured with her father before the marriage ended? Perhaps this is why the marriage ended. In occult families where the man is the occult member, the main victims are the wife and the children. Usually the occultic husband or the husband who's in the occult will quote unquote sacrifice the wife, not just betray her or leave her, but create torment for her, inflicting her with spiritual attacks on her physical, financial, and total well-being. This is not a marital dispute gone bad. This is an onslaught against the spouse who dares to not follow the cult ways. And for Wealth, her mother tried to help as best as she could without driving her daughter away. That's the tragic balance that many protective parents have to hold. And for children in occult families, they are often scapegoated, abused, triangulated against each other, used as collateral in cult groups to clean the sins of the previous generation. Worse yet, they are groomed, indoctrinated to continue the pattern amongst another generation in a society who is largely unaware that all of this is happening. Here's the core truth. You're not just dealing with broken people. You're dealing with people bound by oaths and covenants to darkness. This isn't just about dysfunction, it's about destruction. It's calculated, targeted, and real, and it hides in custody papers, in court orders, in polite society, and even in church pews. So I ask again, if Wealth whispered to you, "I'm not safe at home," what would you do? Could you see the abuse? So how does a parent become someone who abuses their child in this way or allows others to do so? Often they were once children groomed in the very same system. As you listen to these next stories, ask yourself this question. When does a person shift from victim to abuser? Frances is a 68-year-old Nigerian woman who grew up between her home country and the U.S. She was the middle child of 7. She recalls long days in their village church, leading Bible study, singing in the choir. Her father was a respected church leader, honored by many, But at home, it was a different story, as these stories often go. For years, from late childhood through early adolescence, Frances and her younger sisters were repeatedly abused by their father. When she finally confided in one of her older brothers, he did not protect her. He continued where their father would leave off. In a culture that commands absolute respect for parents and silence in the face of harm, her cries for help were met with indifference. And so abuse became normalized. Her heart would grow numb, not out of cruelty initially, but as a shield. What began as survival would eventually become hardened into something else. When Frances got married, she thought she was leaving all of that behind. But intimacy in marriage was already difficult because of her past. It now would become another battlefield. Her husband, instead of being a place of safety, would mirror the same harm that she had tried to escape. The abuse would continue, just in another form. At this point, many would rightly have compassion for Frances, a woman whose girlhood was taken before she ever had a chance to understand it. But her story doesn't stop there. When she began to notice her husband having lingering and inappropriate contact with her daughters, she didn't react with the fear she had known as a child. She responded with something else: jealousy. Yes, jealousy. A woman once abused, now in a position to protect, saw her child not as someone to save, but as someone to resent. She said nothing. She did nothing. She allowed the abuse to continue. And as the years went on, history would repeat itself. When a situation arose involving one of her grandchildren, Frances, now a grandmother, again would stay silent. No intervention, no alarm, just distance, detachment, stone cold. Where she could have advocated, she enabled. Where she could have broken the cycle, she guarded it. This is the devastating truth many don't want to face. Abuse doesn't always show up with bruises. Sometimes it's hidden in a father's silence, in a grandmother's cold eyes, in the ritual of avoidance that masquerades as tradition, in the denial that says, that's just how we do things. By the time truth surfaces, it is often too late. And so I ask you again, when does a victim become an abuser? And more urgently, when do we stop pretending not to see it? Now we come to Patrick. 45-year-old Patrick grew up in a large, tightly knit family, a family that preached loyalty above all. But not all families grow outward in love. Sometimes they grow inward, folding in on themselves, making sameness the only virtue. In those kinds of homes, difference is punished, and family doesn't liberate, it swallows. By the time Patrick was 9, his world would split. What had seemed like a strong family became a fortress of secrets. His older brother began abusing him at night. First once, then twice, then nearly every night. And the most harrowing part was that their mother knew. Not only did she allow it, she sanctioned it, she watched it, she enforced it. For years, Patrick lived in two worlds. Outwardly, he was charismatic, charming, funny, beloved by friends. But inside, he was silenced, fractured, and hiding in plain sight. As a teen, he would come to learn this wasn't just his brother's sickness, it was the family's design. What he endured wasn't a one-off horror, it was ritual abuse, a family cult, a generational sickness passed down like an heirloom, a system where abuse wasn't just tolerated, it was the currency of belonging. Patrick was groomed to carry shame that was not his. He became the scapegoat, taught that submission to pain was proof of loyalty. He learned to smile through torment, to say, "We have a great family," to praise the very hands that broke him. Years would pass, and he would get married, become a husband, and then a father. But the cult's grip did not loosen. The unspoken rule remained. Unless you renounce it, the call from the cult would always come. And Patrick had learned not to resist. Just smile, give in, don't fight. When the old demands resurfaced, so did the temptation to follow them. The same evil that took from him now asked him to take from his own child. Because when darkness offers power, it never comes for free. It doesn't offer healing. It demands replication. It doesn't whisper love. It seethes hate and calls it loyalty. And so the abused became the abuser. The son who once needed protection became the father who failed to protect. His wife, sensing that something was deeply wrong, she would run, take the kids, cry out for help. But cults are expert at suppression. They would lie about her, harass her, paint her as unstable. She fought with everything that she had, but silence fought harder. Eventually, just like so many others, Patrick applied for visitation, a few weekends a month, then more, and with the help of a hidden system backing him, he would gain full access. In many occult families, they move to separate the children from the mother, especially if the mother is the one giving love and protection. Patrick would do the same, receiving help from outside hands to get a ruling that would give him full access, taking the kids away from their mother. To the world, he's a great dad, helpful, friendly, church-going, but behind the veil, he's something else entirely. He knows how to wear the mask. He's been doing it since childhood. He knows how to groom because he was groomed. He knows how to lie because he was trained to protect the lie with his life. This is the cost we refuse to count. Abuse doesn't always look like rage. It often looks like routine. It hides in tradition, in silence, in religion, in family loyalty. It wears a suit. It sits in a pew. It smiles in court, and it fools the world. And so I ask you again, when does a victim become an abuser? And when do we, as a culture, as a people, stop pretending not to see it? We've walked through 3 lives. Wealth, a child whose father used religion and rules to dominate her. Frances, a woman whose stolen girlhood hardened into complicity. And Patrick, a boy turned scapegoat, groomed by family, and later, evil itself to continue the harm. 3 stories, 1 pattern. A pattern of abuse that masquerades as tradition, of silence that shouts louder than truth, of systems, familial, cultural, spiritual, that reward compliance and punish protection. This isn't just about a few broken families. This is a hidden war, a generational curse, a cycle that will keep devouring children until someone stands up and says, "Enough!" This war is still being waged on the most innocent, on the most vulnerable, but silence is no longer an option, and neither is pretending this isn't happening. So, to the aunties and uncles, the mothers and fathers, the grandmas and grandpas who sanctioned abuse, those who stayed silent because of culture, who chose fear instead of protection, who watched children cry and turned away, who enforced what broke them. This is for you. Coming from Ezekiel 29, the Lord is against you. You who made yourselves pharaohs in the very families that God entrusted to you. You treated your children like property, as though you had created them, as though they belonged to you. You twisted their lives, perverted their purpose, and called it order or tradition. To you, the Lord says, He will expose you. He will call you out, and those who followed you in these ways will be called out as well. He will pull you from your hiding places and your private family gatherings. Where you once found comfort, it will dry up. Where once nourished, you will wither. You will lay there bare in the open field in full daylight. You were weak supports to the children who trusted you. When they reached for you, you splintered their hands. When they leaned on you, you shattered their backs. Because you failed to protect the vulnerable ones entrusted to you, the Lord brings a sword against you and against the family cults that you upheld. By His hand, the secret abuses you protected will come into the open. Your rituals of silence and power will be turned into a wasteland. To the children and to the mothers, those who were carrying burdens that were never meant to be theirs, those who were used, abandoned, and broken, hear the word of the Lord from Ezekiel 36. Your enemies sneered, and they said to you that you belonged to them. They ruined and crushed you from every side, and foreign nations captured and made fun of you. So this is what the Lord can do. He will turn against those nations because they laughed at you the loudest and took over the most sensitive parts of your life. You have suffered long enough, and I, the Lord God, am angry. Nations have insulted you, so I will now insult and disgrace them. That is my solemn promise. Where you were once barren, trees will grow on you. Where you could not produce, you will now produce fruit for my people, because they will soon come home. I will take care of you by plowing your soil and planting crops on your fertile slopes. Those who left you will soon return and rebuild your ruined towns and live in them. Children will be born. Animals will give birth to their young. You will no longer be deserted as you are now, but you will be covered with people and treated better than ever before. Then you will know that I am the Lord. So, maybe the better question isn't just, when does a victim become an abuser? Maybe it's this: when do we break the pattern? When do we name it, confront it, and refuse to let it pass to the next child? The war is still being waged, but silence is no longer an option. And neither is pretending that this isn't happening. And with that, love, Leslie.